The sound of metal crunching against metal was a kind of morning symphony in Blightfall, the sort of music that'd drive anyone with sense straight to a noose. But for Jaxer Halloway, it was just another day in paradise. If paradise was a subterranean city carved into the belly of an asteroid, where the only thing brighter than the artificial lights were the dreams of getting out. "Hey, Halloway. You gonna stare at that busted conduit all day or fix it?" hollered a voice from the shadowy depths of the maintenance bay. Jaxer wiped his hands on his grease-stained pants, leaving streaks that could have been modern art in another life. "Relax, Cadden. If I rush, I might just make it worse. Then where would we be? Stuck with an even crappier hellhole, that's where." Cadden, a fellow mechanic whose optimism was as non-existent as the last shipment of fresh air filters, snorted. "As if things could get worse. You know they say the universe is expanding, right? Well, so's my list of things I don't give a shit about." Jaxer chuckled as he reached for the rivet gun. "Yeah, well, if the universe is expanding, maybe one day it'll be big enough to fit all my disappointments." They worked in silence, a silence that was always just a heartbeat away from unraveling into chaos. Blightfall wasn't known for its stability or its beauty. Hell, it wasn't known for anything besides being the armpit of the cosmos, and even that felt like an upgrade. The city had a population of those who'd given up on dreams of green planets and breathable atmospheres. People came here to disappear, to hide from the galaxy and from themselves. And Blightfall was more than happy to oblige. The asteroid had seen better days, but then again, so had all of its residents. With a final pull of the trigger, the rivet gun hissed, sealing the conduit shut with the kind of precision only a person who'd seen too much could muster. The bay door creaked open, and a figure strolled in, a little too confident for anyone's liking. It was Captain Voss, the man who ran this floating prison with all the charm of a rabid rat. "Boys, you might want to put down your toys for a second. We've got a situation." Jaxer and Cadden exchanged glances, a shared look of "what now?" that had become their secret handshake. "What kind of situation?" Jaxer asked, not really wanting to know the answer but also not wanting to be left in the dark, which in Blightfall was a very real possibility considering the unreliable power grid. Voss smirked, the kind of smirk that meant someone somewhere was about to have a very bad day. "Alien scout ship, spotted just outside the belt." Cadden raised an eyebrow. "Aliens? Here? What, did they get lost on the way to somewhere worth invading? Or they're just curious," Jaxer suggested, sarcasm dripping like oil from a leaky engine. "Can't blame him. I mean, who wouldn't want to check out the galaxy's premier rock collection?" Voss folded his arms, his eyes flicking between the two mechanics. "You think this is a joke? If they find us, we're screwed." Jaxer leaned back against the workbench, arms crossed. "Well, maybe they'll take one look at Blightfall and decide it's not worth the effort. I mean, if they want to invade, I'd say let him." "Hell, give them the keys." Cadden nodded. "Yeah, maybe they can fix the damn plumbing while they are at it." Voss's face darkened like a solar eclipse. "You two are gonna get us all killed. Get your asses in gear. We need to make sure no trace of us bleeds out into the void." With a mock salute, Jaxer turned back to his tools. "All right, Captain, but just so you know, if they do show up, I'm jumping ship. I hear space is the new frontier for peace and quiet." As Voss stomped away, Cadden muttered, "Think he knows the meaning of the word quiet?" Jaxer shrugged, grabbing a wrench. "If he does, he's keeping it to himself." The day dragged on, each tick of the clock a reminder that time was a construct designed to make them all miserable. Jaxer spent most of it hunched over malfunctioning machines, the kind that looked like they were assembled by drunk engineers on their day off. But the thought of an alien ship lingering just beyond their asteroid kept nagging at him, like a splinter he couldn't quite remove. What would aliens even want with Blightfall? Unless they were searching for the universe's most depressing vacation spot. He shook his head, trying to focus on the task at hand, but his mind kept drifting back to the what-ifs. The truth was, nobody really knew what lay out there. Sure, they had books and stories, but those were written by people who'd never been further than the nearest bar. The truth was, nobody really knew what lay out there. Sure, they had books and stories, but those were written by people who'd never been further than the nearest bar. As the day wore on, Jaxer found himself standing at the edge of the maintenance bay, staring at the faint, shimmery outline of the asteroid's dome. Above him, the stars blinked like indifferent gods, watching over this forgotten corner of the galaxy. Cadden joined him, and for a moment they stood in silence, contemplating the cosmic joke they'd become a part of. "You ever think about getting out of here?" Cadden asked, his voice low, as if the question itself was a dangerous secret. Jaxer snorted. "Every damn day. But then I remember how expensive tickets off this rock are, and I figure I'd rather spend my cash on something more useful." "Like food," Cadden chuckled. "Yeah, can't exactly trade dreams for rations, can you?" "Nah," Jaxer said, turning away from the stars. "But I like to think if I save up enough, maybe one day I'll buy myself a nice little plot of emptiness out there. Somewhere I can scream into the void without anyone telling me to shut up." As they headed back into the bay, Jaxer couldn't shake the feeling that their little slice of monotony was about to be upended. Maybe it was the alien scout ship, or maybe it was just the creeping sense of doom that came with living in a place like Blightfall. Either way, he was ready for whatever came next. After all, it couldn't be worse than fixing pipes all day, or at least that's what he kept telling himself. The next morning, Jaxer was awakened by the blaring of alarms, a sound that was as welcome as a punch to the face. He rolled out of bed, cursing the universe and its insistence on making his life difficult. "What now?" he grumbled, pulling on his boots and making his way to the control room. The place was a hive of activity, people rushing around with expressions that ranged from mildly panicked to downright terrified. It was the kind of atmosphere that made you wish you were anywhere else. Captain Voss was barking orders, his voice cutting through the chaos like a rusty knife. "Everyone, shut up and listen. We've got incoming signals." "The aliens are trying to communicate." Jaxer found a corner to lean against, watching the spectacle unfold with a mixture of amusement and dread. "Maybe they just want to borrow some sugar," he muttered to Cadden, who joined him in the corner. Cadden snorted. "Yeah, or maybe they're here to warn us about galactic surveyors." Voss slammed his fist against the console, silencing the room. "We're gonna reply. And we're gonna make damn sure they know we're not worth their time." The assembly gathered around a flickering screen, the alien message scrolling across it in a language that looked like someone had sneezed on the keyboard. Jaxer raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'm convinced." The communication officer, a woman named Eris with a penchant for sarcasm that rivaled Jaxer's, worked feverishly to translate the message. "Looks like they're saying." "Greetings, greetings," Voss echoed, skepticism dripping from every syllable. "What do they want to sell us something?" Eris continued. "They say they are explorers. They want to learn about our culture." Cadden chuckled darkly. "Shows what they know." The room erupted into a flurry of debate, suggestions flying like bullets in a firefight. But Jaxer remained silent, watching the scene with a growing sense of foreboding. If the aliens really did want to learn about Blightfall, they were in for a hell of a disappointment. Voss finally raised his hands, demanding quiet. "All right, here's what we're gonna do. We'll respond, and we'll make sure it sounds like we're the most boring place in the universe." Jaxer couldn't help but grin. "Shouldn't be too hard, right?" The captain glared at him, but there was a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "If anyone can make this place seem less appealing, it's you, Holloway." "Glad to be of service," Jaxer replied with a mock bow. As they prepared to send their reply, the tension in the room was palpable. Jaxer watched as the message was composed, each word carefully chosen to deter any further interest from their unwelcome visitors. It was a simple plan, really. If the aliens wanted to learn about Blightfall, they'd soon realize it was like watching paint dry, only without the excitement. As the reply was sent, Jaxer found himself hoping that they'd succeeded in making their home seem as uninteresting as possible. After all, they had a reputation to uphold. And yet, a part of him couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to see the stars up close, to venture beyond the confines of this asteroid and into the unknown. But for now, he was content to remain where he was, watching as the galaxy continued to spin around him, indifferent and eternal. The aliens, it turned out, were not just a curious bunch of tourists hoping to collect postcards from the universe's least exciting destinations. They were an invasion force led by General V. Rixel, whose name sounded like someone choking on a mouthful of cereal. As the alien armada arrived and parked itself right outside the asteroid belt, it caused about as much excitement as a tax audit. Blightfall, with its grand population of didn't ask to be here, and just passing through, greeted the news with a collective shrug. Jaxer and Cadden, ever the optimists, spotted the alien ships from the maintenance bay's viewport, which was usually reserved for monitoring the occasional meteor shower or watching paint dry, whichever happened first. "Look at that," Cadden said, pointing at the armada. "The circus has come to town." "Yeah," Jaxer replied, squinting as if that would somehow make the situation less dire. "Hope they brought peanuts." They watched as the alien ships hovered, imposing in their sleek metallic glory, the kind of design that screamed, "We have a budget," unlike anything in Blightfall. Captain Voss had summoned a meeting of the city's council, which was basically a gathering of the least disliked folks with the most free time. Jaxer and Cadden were reluctantly included, much like adding a rusty bolt to a shiny new engine. As they entered the council chamber, if you could call a cramped room with flickering lights a chamber, they found a collection of grimacing faces. Maggie, the council leader, and a woman with a voice like gravel wrapped in sandpaper, banged her gavel. "All right, let's get this over with. We've got aliens at our doorstep and they ain't here for the views." One of the council members, a wiry man with a perpetually sour expression named Clive, snorted. "Maybe they just wanted to see the worst Blightfall has to offer. We should give them a tour." Jaxer leaned over to Cadden. "I'll bet 5 credits they leave before lunch. 10 says they ask for a refund," Cadden replied, smirking. Maggie continued, ignoring the snide remarks like a seasoned pro. "Now we've got 2 options, fight or, well, let's face it, that's not really an option. It's more like fight poorly and hope they don't notice. Or we could do what we do best," Clive suggested with a sardonic smile. "Nothing. Passive resistance," Jaxer said, nodding thoughtfully. "That sounds like us. Lazy but with a hint of dignity." Maggie looked around the room, her gaze settling on Jaxer. "Got any better ideas, Halloway? Or are you just gonna sit there and crack jokes all day?" "Jokes are free, Maggie," Jaxer replied. "But if we're aiming for a strategic disaster, I'm your man." The council debated like a pack of vultures fighting over a well-picked carcass, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of pessimism. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a decision: adopt a non-aggressive defense strategy and hope the aliens got bored and went home. It wasn't much, but it was better than getting obliterated. As the meeting adjourned, Jaxer and Cadden lingered at the back of the room, listening to the chatter die down. "Think this'll work?" Cadden asked, scratching his neck absently. Jaxer shrugged. "Depends. Do you think they can tell the difference between passive resistance and just being bad at our jobs?" The 2 mechanics retreated back to their workshop, the weight of impending doom hanging over them like a particularly stubborn cloud. The alien threat loomed large, but if anyone could make inaction a strategy, it was Blightfall's finest. Later, as they tinkered with yet another dodgy conduit, the comms crackled to life. "Attention, Blightfall," a voice boomed, sounding like it had been run through a garbage disposal. "This is General V. Rixel of the Glorm Empire. We demand your surrender." Jaxer rolled his eyes. "Demand? That's a strong word coming from someone who hasn't even met us," Cadden smirked. "Maybe he's just looking for friends, poor guy." Voss's voice cut through the static like a chainsaw through butter. "This is Captain Voss of Blightfall. No one's here, go away." There was a pause, and then V. Rixel's voice returned, dripping with condescension. "We know you're there. We've detected your life signs." Cadden snorted. "Well, there's your problem." They're looking for signs of life. Voss sighed audibly over the comms. All right, fine, we're here, but you're wasting your time. Nothing worth conquering here unless you like broken pipes and bad coffee. The comms fell silent, leaving the two mechanics to their task. What do you think they'll do? Cadden asked, frowning at a particularly stubborn bolt. Jaxer shrugged, the motion casual despite the tension. Well, if they're smart, they'll realize conquering Blightfall is about as rewarding as kicking a puppy. But if they're as stupid as we hope, they might just stick around to see what happens. As evening fell, or whatever passed for evening in a place with no actual day or night, the alien ships remained unmoving, a silent testament to either their persistence or their stupidity. Jaxer reclined against a wall, staring up at the ceiling with a sigh. You ever wonder, he said, what it'd be like to actually have a quiet day here? No aliens, no breakdowns, just peace. Cadden chuckled, the sound dry as sandpaper. Sounds like a fairy tale. You've been reading again, Jaxer grinned. Just trying to remember what optimism feels like. But as the Iors dragged on, optimism seemed as distant as the stars themselves. The alien ships hovered silently, their intentions unclear but their presence undeniable. In the council chamber, a subdued meeting was in progress, the mood as uplifting as a funeral in a hurricane. Maggie addressed the weary group, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen it all and was tired of seeing more. We've sent our message, she said, her gravelly voice echoing off the walls. Let's see what they do with it. Jaxer, standing near the back, exchanged a glance with Cadden. Think they'll take the hint? Cadden snorted softly. We barely do, so probably not. The meeting ended, the members dispersing with the air of people resigned to their fate. As Jaxer and Cadden made their way back to the maintenance bay, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken concerns. Feels like we're living in one of those old stories, Cadden said, breaking the silence. You know, the kind where the heroes overcome impossible odds. Heroes, Jaxer repeated, shaking his head. We can't even fix a leaky pipe. I'm not holding my breath for a heroic ending. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden screech of the comms, a sound that made Jaxer's teeth clench in irritation. Captain Voss's voice followed, laced with frustration and a hint of desperation. All personnel prepare for possible hostilities, he announced, his tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. The aliens are making demands. Looks like they're not satisfied with our hospitality, Jaxer sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Guess it's showtime. They suited up, the process as familiar as it was tedious. As they headed towards the main access corridor, tension pulled at the edges of their fatigue. The corridor was lined with other inhabitants, all wearing expressions that ranged from indifference to mild concern. Jaxer and Cadden found their positions, joining the impromptu assembly gathered under the dim glow of the emergency lights. Voss stood at the forefront, his presence commanding but weary, like a tired drill sergeant at the end of a long march. They want to land, Voss said without preamble. Their general seems to think we're hiding something. Clive, ever the cynic, piped up from the back. Yeah, hiding the truth that we're all broke and miserable. The crowd chuckled, a sound more bitter than mirthful. Voss allowed the humor to die before continuing. They've given us an ultimatum. Let them land or they'll do it anyway. Well, that's what you call negotiating from a position of strength, Jaxer commented, earning a few nods from those nearby. Maggie stepped forward, her presence steadying. We don't have much choice, she said, but if they land, we play it cool. Let them see for themselves that there's nothing here worth taking. Think that'll work? Someone asked, doubt evident in their voice. If it doesn't, Maggie replied, we'll deal with it, just like we deal with everything else that gets thrown our way. The crowd dispersed, leaving behind the lingering scent of apprehension. Jaxer and Cadden lingered, their thoughts mirroring the gravity of the situation. You think she'll ask them to fix the plumbing? Cadden asked, a smirk playing on his lips. Probably, Jaxer replied. Can't hurt to ask. As they trudged back to the maintenance bay, fingers crossed that the aliens' curiosity would be as short-lived as their previous visitors, the pair shared a moment of quiet camaraderie. This might be the end of Blightfall's anonymity, or just another bump in the tragically unsmooth road. Either way, they'd face it like they faced everything else, with a toolbox, a shrug, and a well-timed joke. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of hope that tomorrow would be as uneventful as today. The air in the bleak corridors of Blightfall was filled with the comforting aroma of burnt circuitry and desperation. Jaxer liked it here, not because it was pleasant, mind you, but because it was home, a broken, dilapidated home, but home nonetheless. And right now, home had some uninvited guests loitering outside, like interstellar hooligans looking for trouble. The aliens, as it turned out, were a stubborn lot. General Vrixel and his Glorm Empire ships loomed on the horizon, a constant reminder that Blightfall was in the galactic spotlight, even if no one had asked for it. Their attempts to provoke Blightfall into submission were laughably amateurish, akin to a schoolyard bully demanding lunch money from a kid with no lunch. Jaxer sat amidst a heap of tangled wires, his trusty rivet gun in hand, pretending to care about the alien threat while he patched up another conduit. Cadden, nearby, was busy dismantling a panel with the precision of a man who'd dismantled a few too many in his lifetime. "Think they're still trying to intimidate us?" Jaxer asked, nodding towards the viewport where the alien ships were visible, hovering like a bad idea that just wouldn't go away. Cadden grinned, his hands deftly working away. "If they are, they're doing a stellar job of failing. Maybe they think we're secretly planning some grand resistance." Jaxer chuckled, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "Yeah, we'll launch a counterattack with our arsenal of broken dreams and faulty wiring." As the hours ticked by with all the urgency of a snail race, the aliens got testier. Blightfall's response, or lack thereof, was starting to test their patience. The Glorm Empire wasn't used to being ignored, and it showed. "We demand to know your defenses." Vrixel's voice crackled over the comms, sounding like a robot with laryngitis. Jaxer rolled his eyes, flipping a switch and listening to the satisfying hum of power returning to the circuitry. "Our defenses. Tell them we're armed with scathing sarcasm and soul-crushing apathy." Voss's voice interrupted, dry as a desert and twice as sandy. "This is Captain Voss. Our defenses are classified, but I can assure you they are as effective as they are invisible." There was a pause, heavy with the kind of disbelief that only comes from standing in front of a locked door with a fake handle. "We will land," Vrixel continued, his tone more eager than threatening, "and we will find what you are hiding." Jaxer sighed dramatically, setting down his rivet gun. "Those poor aliens. Imagine coming all this way just to be disappointed." Cadden smirked, his expression one of unperturbed confidence. "Maybe we should just give them a tour, show them the sights, starting with our sewage system." As Jaxer contemplated the potential hilarity of alien invaders inspecting the sewers, he caught sight of a blinking light on one of the control panels. It was the kind of light that usually meant something had gone horribly wrong, or in Blightfall's case, something hadn't gone horribly wrong yet. "What's that?" Cadden asked, tossing a stripped bolt into a nearby bin with the finesse of a man who missed his calling in professional sports. "Trouble," Jaxer replied, squinting at the panel. "Or opportunity, depending on how you look at it." He got to work, his fingers nimble despite the grease and grime. Blightfall's infrastructure was a patchwork quilt of outdated tech and half-baked repairs, and Jaxer was the closest thing it had to a seamstress. If you squinted, the system was a masterpiece of engineering. If you opened your eyes, it was a disaster waiting to happen. "We've got some power fluctuations here," Jaxer said, tapping a screen as if it might suddenly decide to be cooperative. "I can reroute some of the energy grids. Give us a little more stability." Cadden leaned in, peering at the disarray. "You think that'll help if they attack?" "Not unless we plan on clubbing them with extension cords," Jaxer replied, "but it might buy us some time." As they fiddled with the wiring, the alien ships continued their silent vigil. The Glorm Empire was persistent, Jaxer had to give them that. But persistence only got you so far in a place like Blightfall, where apathy reigned supreme. The comms crackled again, Voss's voice barely masking a yawn. "They're sending down a landing party, folks. Try not to roll out the red carpet. We're not that kind of place." Jaxer grinned. "Red carpet? We can barely manage a welcome mat." With the power fluctuations dealt with, at least temporarily, Jaxer and Cadden made their way to the central hub where the landing was expected. The hub was a marvel of questionable architecture, all exposed beams and flickering lights. If the aliens were expecting grandeur, they were in for a disappointment. "They're landing over there," Cadden said, pointing to a makeshift space that had once been a cargo bay. "Think they'll be impressed?" Jaxer snorted. "Only if they've got a thing for rusty metal and the scent of despair." The doors slid open with a groan that sounded suspiciously like a creature in pain, and the alien landing party stepped through, led by General Vrixel himself. The general was tall and imposing, his scales shimmering like an oil slick in the artificial light. To his credit, he didn't flinch at the state of the place, but his expression was that of a man who'd just bitten into an apple and found half a worm. "Welcome to Blightfall," Voss said, arms spread wide in a gesture that was either welcoming or surrendering, depending on your perspective. Vrixel surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on the exposed wiring and questionable decor. "This is it?" he asked, incredulous. Jaxer grinned, unable to resist the opportunity. "We save the good stuff for special occasions." Vrixel's eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping in. "You are hiding something." Jaxer exchanged a look with Cadden. "Yeah, our embarrassment." The alien general seemed unimpressed, his eyes sweeping the room once more. "We will conduct a thorough search," he announced, as if expecting someone to protest. "Knock yourself out," Jaxer said, gesturing towards the mess. "But don't touch anything that looks like it might explode," which is, most things. As the aliens dispersed, examining every dusty corner and frayed cable, the residents of Blightfall watched with a mix of bemusement and boredom. The general's search was thorough, if misguided, and the longer he looked, the more obvious it became that Blightfall was hiding nothing except perhaps its pride. "They're really going all out," Cadden remarked, watching a pair of aliens poke at a pile of scrap metal as if it might reveal the secrets of the universe. "Can't blame them," Jaxer replied. "If I were in their shoes, I'd be looking for a reason to leave too." Hours dragged by, the search turning up little more than dust bunnies and rust. The aliens, for all their might and technology, seemed at a loss, their efforts yielding nothing but a newfound appreciation for Blightfall's unique brand of chaos. "We should start charging them rent," Jaxer suggested, watching as another alien stubbed his toe on a crate and swore in an alien dialect that sounded remarkably like a cat coughing up a hairball. Cadden chuckled. "Think they're starting to regret this expedition?" "Possibly," Jaxer said, "or they're just trying to figure out how to tell their boss they wasted a trip." Eventually, Vrixel regrouped with his landing party, the look on his face one of resigned frustration. "You are hiding something," he repeated, more to himself than anyone else. Jaxer, ever helpful, nodded. "Absolutely. It's called reality. You should try visiting sometime." The general's glare could have melted steel, but Jaxer, unfazed, simply grinned back. After all, what was one more angry alien in a place like Blightfall? The alien party finally withdrew, leaving Blightfall's inhabitants with the lingering question of what came next. There was tension, sure, but it was the kind of tension that Blightfall thrived on, a low-level hum that underscored every day of their lives. "Think they'll come back?" Cadden asked, watching the ships retreat to their positions. "Probably," Jaxer replied. "But hey, if they want to join our misery, who are we to stop them?" As the day wound down, Jaxer returned to the maintenance bay, his mind already plotting the next round of modifications. If the aliens did decide to attack, which they probably would, given their current track record, Blightfall would need every advantage it could muster. And if that meant rerouting power and reinforcing weak points, so be it. "Back at it, huh?" Cadden asked, joining him as he sorted through a collection of tools that were more rust than metal. Yep, Jaxer replied, pulling out a wrench that had seen better days. Can't have them thinking we're easy targets. Cadden nodded, an understanding passing between them that required no words. They were two cogs in a machine that barely functioned, but they were cogs nonetheless. And if they could tweak the system just enough to keep Blightfall standing, then they'd do it, sarcasm and all. As the Iors bled into one another, Jaxer worked tirelessly, his modifications small but significant. Each adjustment was a step towards resilience, a testament to Blightfall's ability to adapt and endure. And if the aliens thought they could break them, well, they'd soon learn that Blightfall wasn't so easily broken. Almost feels like we're making progress, Cadden remarked, watching Jaxer secure a panel with a satisfying clunk. Almost, Jaxer agreed, a rare hint of optimism in his voice. But let's not jinx it. With the final adjustment in place, Jaxer leaned back, surveying his work. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And in Blightfall, something was often as good as it got. As the two mechanics packed up for the night, the alien ship still hovered like silent sentinels. They'd made it through another day without incident, and in Blightfall, that was an achievement worth celebrating. Think we'll get some sleep tonight? Cadden asked, stifling a yawn. Jaxer shrugged, his expression one of weary amusement. In this place? Not a chance. But hey, can't hurt to dream. And so, as the shadows lengthened and the artificial night descended, Jaxer and Cadden settled in for another restless night in Blightfall, ever aware of the looming threat but confident in their ability to face whatever came next, rivet guns at the ready and wits as sharp as ever. The day after the alien search fizzled out like a wet firecracker, Blightfall was eerily calm. You might have thought the place was taking a breather before the next round, but Jaxer wasn't buying the peace. Not in Blightfall. Peace was as rare as a clean pair of socks. He was in the maintenance bay, tinkering with a circuit board that looked like it had been used as a coaster. Cadden was there too, doing his best impression of someone who cared about his work, which mostly involved staring at a set of pliers like they held the secrets of the universe. Feels too quiet, Cadden muttered, finally giving up on the pliers and tossing them into the toolbox with a clatter. Think they're planning something probably, Jaxer replied, eyes not leaving the board. I mean, if I was an alien general and just spent a day touring our lovely facilities, I'd be planning something too. Like maybe a therapy session. Cadden snorted. You think they're smart enough for that? Smart enough to find us, Jaxer said, flipping the board over, dumb enough to stick around. So I'd say intelligence is not exactly their strong suit. Their conversation was interrupted by the crackle of the comms system, which was as reliable as a politician's promise. Captain Voss's voice came through, laden with the usual charm of a dentist telling you to floss more. Attention, people of Blightfall, Voss droned, we've intercepted some alien transmissions. It seems General V. Rixel has a new plan. And I thought I'd share the joy with all of you, Jaxer perked up, intrigued. New plan. What are they going to redecorate? Apparently, Voss continued, they're trying psychological warfare. Spread some kind of boredom-induced virus. Make us too bored to fight back. Jaxer and Cadden exchanged a look. Boredom? They've met us, right? Cadden quipped. That's like trying to drown a fish. Yeah, Jaxer agreed, scratching his chin. They'd have better luck making us tired by reading the nutritional information on a cereal box. Voss continued, but, you know, just in case anyone cares, I'd suggest not giving in. Boredom kills, or so I'm told. Well, Cadden said, we've got nothing to worry about then. We're already dead inside. Jaxer chuckled, but his mind was already whirring like the busted fans he worked on daily. Psychological warfare was one thing, but a virus. That was a problem he could sink his teeth into. Cadden, I think it's time we show them what Blightfall's really made of. Rust and despair. No, Jaxer said, cunning and stubbornness. Cadden raised an eyebrow. That's optimistic. We'll work with what we've got, Jaxer replied, heading towards the central hub. He had a plan, and in Blightfall, plans were as good as gold, even if they usually ended up being worth as much as fool's gold. In the central hub, the council had gathered. Maggie, the gravelly-voiced leader, was holding court like a queen on a throne made of broken promises. "What's the news?" Maggie asked, her voice like sandpaper on a bad day. Jaxer gave her a nod. "We've got a boredom virus on our hands," Clive, sire as ever, grumbled from his corner. "Does it come with a bottle of gin? Because that's the only way I'm getting through this." "No gin, just grit," Jaxer said. "I think we can counter it." Maggie leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What's your angle, Jaxer? An antivirus?" "We've got the tech, or at least the bits of tech that can pretend to be something useful if you squint hard enough. I figure, if we can rig something up, we can throw their plan back in their faces." The room was silent for a moment, the kind of silence that usually preceded someone telling you your fly was down. Then Maggie chuckled, a sound like gravel being chewed. "You've got guts, Jaxer." "I'll give you that." Clive crossed his arms. "And here I thought we'd just sit around and wait to die of boredom." Jaxer shrugged. "We still can, Clive. I just figured we'd try not to make it easy for them." "What do you say, Maggie?" Maggie nodded slowly. "All right, Jaxer, you've got my support." "What do you need?" "People who don't mind risking a little electrocution," Jaxer said with a grin. "And maybe some coffee." Lots of coffee. With Maggie's blessing, Jaxer set to work assembling his team of misfits. Cadden, obviously, and a few other mechanics who'd been around long enough to recognize a last-ditch effort when they saw one. As they huddled in the maintenance bay, Jaxer sketched out a rough plan on a piece of scrap metal. It wasn't pretty, but in Blightfall, pretty was for the weak. "So what are we looking at here?" asked Naya, a sharp-witted engineer with a knack for making the impossible merely improbable. "Using our systems to counteract their virus," Jaxer said. "Think of it like using a sieve to catch water. If we can disrupt their signal, we might just be able to send it back at them." Naya frowned. "You mean bore them to death with their own virus?" Jaxer grinned. "Exactly. Turn the tables. Show them we're not just sitting ducks." Cadden, fiddling with a rivet gun, nodded. "Sounds like a plan. A terrible, risky plan, but a plan nonetheless." The team set to work, the maintenance bay echoing with the clinks and clanks of hopeful desperation. Jaxer moved from station to station, offering advice, sometimes even useful, and generally pretending like he had more of a clue than he did. Naya, hunched over a mess of wires, called out, "We're gonna need a lot more power for this, Jaxer. More power." Jaxer asked, rubbing a hand through his hair. "Guess I'll have to sweet-talk the reactor again." "Don't you mean curse at it until it complies?" Cadden interjected. "Call it what you want," Jaxer replied. "The reactor and I have an understanding. It understands I'll kick it if it doesn't behave." The Iors dragged on, the team running on caffeine and spite, but they began to see the light at the end of the proverbial tunnel. A train, perhaps, but at least it was moving. Jaxer leaned over the control panel, trying not to think about the fact that he was trusting his life to a machine that sounded like it had tuberculosis. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a few more tweaks." Maggie's voice crackled over the intercom. "How's it looking, Jaxer?" "Like a disaster waiting to happen," Jaxer replied. "Which, you know, is better than usual." "Well, just remember, if you blow us all to smithereens, I'm haunting you," Maggie shot back. "Noted," Jaxer said. "We'll go for mild inconvenience instead." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jaxer wiped his greasy hands on his equally greasy coveralls and surveyed their handiwork. It was a Frankenstein's monster of tech, a patchwork of hope and desperation, but it was theirs. "Time to see if it works," he said, stepping back. Cadden flipped a switch, the contraption humming to life with all the grace of a drunk trying to sing opera. They watched the monitors, the tension thick enough to choke on. The system word blinked and then, success. The antivirus fired up, sending a signal back out into the cosmos. Jaxer didn't know if it would work, but it was a punch, and in Blightfall you took your swings when you could. Jaxer exhaled, leaning against the console. "All right. Now we wait. Think it'll work?" Cadden asked, skepticism mixed with hope. "Depends on how much they like their own medicine," Jaxer replied. "But here's hoping they choke on it." The team dispersed. the adrenaline finally wearing off as exhaustion took over. Blightfall was still standing, and that was more than enough for one day. Jaxer and Cadden lingered, watching the flickering lights of the alien ship still hanging in the sky like an unwanted reminder of reality. "Think they'll leave us alone now?" Cadden asked, not really expecting an answer. "Who knows?" Jaxer said, rubbing his eyes. "But for now, we've done what we can." With that, they left the maintenance bay, the echoes of their footsteps fading into the hum of Blightfall's endless night. In a universe that was always expanding, always filled with threats and challenges, they'd done what humans do best, faced the impossible with a grin and a middle finger. As they made their way back through the winding corridors, Jaxer thought about the future. It was uncertain, sure, but that didn't mean they'd stop fighting, stop resisting. They'd keep going because that's what people did in Blightfall. "Hey, Jaxer," Cadden said, breaking into his thoughts. "You ever think about what we'd do if we didn't have aliens breathing down our necks?" Jaxer chuckled. "Probably die of boredom." Cadden laughed, shaking his head. "Yeah, I guess we would." And with that, they stepped out into the artificial night, ready to face whatever new disaster tomorrow might bring, confident in the knowledge that, whatever happened, they'd find a way to endure. The universe was expanding, all right, but it sure felt like Blightfall was shrinking. The city, a beauty if you were really into concrete and metal, was buzzing with an energy that screamed impending doom. The flickering lights overhead didn't do much to calm anyone's nerves, and the recycled air tasted more burnt than usual. All signs pointed to a surprise, a nasty one. Jaxer, with his hands begrimed from poking around the innards of machines that had seen better millennia, leaned against a wall in the central hub. Sweat trickled down his face like it was making a desperate escape from the chaos. Cadden appeared at his side, grinning like a maniac. "Hear that, Jaxer? That's the sound of an alien invasion." "And I didn't even get them a welcome wagon." Jaxer chuckled, but it was more an exhale of resignation than actual humor. "No worries, Cadden. They'll be disappointed anyway. We're fresh out of party favors. Unless they like rust." The blaring warnings from the city's ancient alarm system were as close to a symphony as Blightfall ever got, harsh, screeching, and enough to make anyone want to rip their hair out. Captain Voss's voice crackled through the comms, his usual deadpan delivery now tinged with just a hint of "I told you so." "Attention, Blightfall. Looks like General Vrixel's boys are here to play. And they're not bringing cookies." Maggie, ever the picture of calm in a storm, appeared through the chaos, her gravelly voice cutting through the noise. "Jaxer, we need to keep everyone from losing their heads." "Panic's infectious and not in the fun viral video way, got it, Maggie. I'll keep them entertained with shadow puppets," Jaxer replied, smirking. He turned to Cadden. "Think you can sell him on that idea?" Cadden shrugged. "Worth a shot. Better than the alien virus, at least." Blightfall's citizens were a hardy bunch, but even the toughest got twitchy when enemy ships loomed overhead, casting shadows that felt like the universe's middle finger pointed right at them. Jaxer needed to keep morale from plummeting faster than a cement anchor in a black hole. The central hub was a hive of activity, people buzzing around with the urgency of ants on a picnic table. The problem was, everyone had their own idea of what needed doing, and half of them had the sense of direction of a drunk pilot. Jaxer climbed atop a rickety chair, probably one more misplaced elbow away from collapse, and banged a wrench against the nearest metal surface for attention. "All right, listen up. I know you're all ready to play hero, but how about we stick to the usual? Survive now, crazy later." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, though whether it was from the joke or the fact that Jaxer looked like he might tumble off his makeshift podium, who knew? "We've got to coordinate," Jaxer continued. "Let's make sure the defenses actually, defend. Anyone who knows which end of a rivet gun is the business end, get your ass to the maintenance bay. Everyone else, find somewhere to be useful. And no, Clive, that doesn't mean the bar." From the back, Clive grumbled something probably best left unheard but moved with the others nonetheless. As the crowd dispersed, Maggie sidled up next to Jaxer. You make a decent rabble-rouser, Jaxer. Ever think of a career in politics, he snorted, and talk more than I do now. I'd rather eat a live power conduit. With the defensive crew assembled, Jaxer and Cadden led the charge back to the maintenance bay. It was a far cry from an armory, but they'd make do. It was Blightfall, after all. If they didn't have something, they'd make it, break it, and then fix it until it worked. "All right, folks," Jaxer said, gesturing to the wall of tools and tech. "Time to make these aliens regret waking up this morning. Or whatever it is aliens do," Cadden added. "Do they even sleep? Maybe they just hang upside down in a closet," Naya said, already elbow-deep in some contraption that looked like a blender crossed with a grenade. As they worked, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a laser. Jaxer moved between teams, doing his best to project an air of confidence, though inside, his gut was churning like he'd swallowed a live octopus. "Hey, Jaxer," Naya called out over the clatter. "I think I found a way to boost the defense grid. Might keep them busy long enough for us to think of something smart. Think you can get it up and running before they're knocking at our door?" Jaxer asked. Naya flashed a grin that was more teeth than warmth. "Already on it. I just need a couple more hands." "Hands we got," Jaxer said, nodding to a pair of nearby workers. "Cadden, get over there and help her out." Cadden sauntered over, clearly trying to appear more confident than he felt. "Ready to save the day. Just don't touch anything you shouldn't," Naya warned. "We'd like to live to see tomorrow." "All right, no pressure then," Cadden replied, rolling up his sleeves. Meanwhile, Jaxer had his own problems. The defense systems were older than dirt and about as reliable as a cardboard spacesuit. He poked around the circuits, cursing under his breath and wondering how much longer they could keep this charade up. The truth was, resource shortages were a real kick in the teeth. They were running low on everything that wasn't rusted metal or bad jokes. If the aliens decided to play the long game, Blightfall would fold like a cheap suit. Out of nowhere, the lights flickered, then died. The bay was plunged into darkness, everyone freezing as if the power outage would make them invisible. "Great," Jaxer grumbled. "Now would be the perfect time for a candlelit dinner, if we had candles or dinner." The emergency lights kicked in, casting the bay in a dim, red glow that was more haunted house than functional workspace. "Guess we'll have to work in the mood lighting," Cadden said, voice echoing eerily. Jaxer sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, let's get this done." "The aliens won't wait for us to find the right ambience." Slowly, haltingly, the defenses were brought online, each piece cobbled together like a toddler's art project. Still, it was better than nothing, and Jaxer couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride for his motley crew. "Think these'll hold?" Cadden asked, coming to stand beside Jaxer. "They'll hold long enough for us to make a break for it, at least," Jaxer said, his tone more optimistic than his thoughts. They didn't have to wait long before the alien ships made their move, advancing with the confidence of a predator that's cornered its prey. The first blasts shook the foundation of Blightfall, dust raining down like a very aggressive snowfall. "Guess we're the main event," Cadden muttered, bracing himself against a console. "Showtime, folks," Jaxer shouted, rallying the team. "Let's see if we can't keep them entertained." The defenses roared to life, energy pulses firing into the void. It was a light show worthy of a rock concert, though the stakes were considerably higher. The alien ships returned fire, their weapons searing through the night with a malevolent beauty. Jaxer worked furiously, fingers flying over the controls. Every system was at its limit, the console sparking under the strain. He could feel the tension in the air, the fear, but also the determination. Blightfall wasn't going down without a fight. Maggie's voice came through the comms, steady as ever. "Jaxer, how's it looking over there?" "Could be worse," he replied, a grin splitting his face. "Could be better, but hey, we're still breathing." "Don't get too comfortable," Maggie warned. "They're ramping up the offensive." Jaxer took a deep breath. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." But it wasn't long before the aliens pushed their advantage. The city's defenses were valiant, sure, but no match for the relentless assault. Systems began to fail, the power fluxing dangerously. We're losing power. Naya shouted over the din, her voice barely audible above the chaos. Cut off non-essentials. Jaxer ordered, though he knew it was a stopgap measure. The alien strategy was working. They were running Blightfall into the ground, one system failure at a time. The pressure was mounting, hope dwindling like oxygen in a vacuum. Jaxer, they're targeting the comms tower, Cadden said, eyes wide with the realization. If we lose that, we're dead in the water. Then we can't let them have it, Jaxer replied, jaw set. He turned to the team, raising his voice over the cacophony. All right, time for a last stand. Anyone who can walk, grab whatever you've got and move out. The ragtag group sprang into action, moving with the urgency of people who knew they were out of options. They hurtled down corridors, each step echoing like a countdown to disaster. The comms tower was as battered as the rest of Blightfall, but it was their lifeline. Without it, they'd be cut off, isolated, the last nail in their collective coffin. Jaxer and his crew rushed to its defense, the odds stacked against them. Here they come, Cadden shouted, pointing to the advancing alien troops. They were sleek, efficient, weapons raised like harbingers of doom. Jaxer gripped his rivet gun like it was the last hope of humanity. Remember, aim for the ugly ones. Which ones are those? Naya shouted back, ducking as a shot whizzed past her head. Exactly. Jaxer replied, firing into the crowd of advancing enemies. The battle was fierce, aliens and humans clashing with a desperation born of necessity. For every alien that fell, it seemed two more took its place. The air was thick with the stench of sweat and ozone, the sound of combat a deafening roar. Jaxer fought with the tenacity of a man who knew he had nothing left to lose. He fired wildly, each shot a prayer, each hit a small, hollow victory. Around him, his friends and allies matched his fervor, each of them fighting for the only home they'd ever known. But they were running out of time, out of options. The aliens pressed forward, relentless, unstoppable. Jaxer felt a pang of despair, the sinking realization that they might not make it. Jaxer, Cadden shouted, pointing to a weak spot in the alien line there. If we push, we might break through. Jaxer's eyes flicked to the point Cadden indicated. It was a slim chance, but it was all they had. All right. Everyone focus fire there. This is it. With renewed energy, the defenders concentrated their efforts, each shot chipping away at the alien forces. It was a long shot, but they were Blightfall. Long shots were their specialty. The aliens faltered, their line breaking under the sudden assault. Jaxer seized the moment, pushing forward with the last of his strength. Come on, Blightfall, he shouted, voice hoarse but defiant. Let's send these bastards packing. And as the defenders surged forward, hope flickered, just for a moment, in the swirling chaos. Perhaps, just perhaps, they'd make it through the night. Jaxer leaned against a console, surveying the chaos as if it were an abstract painting only he could appreciate. Blightfall was a swirling mess of noise, light, and desperation, his kind of party. The air tasted like burnt metal and bad decisions. Hey, Jaxer, Naya hollered, crouching beside a heap of sparking electronics. I think I've found something interesting. Interesting like a winning lottery ticket, or interesting like an alien death ray. Jaxer replied, sauntering over, eyes glinting with curiosity. Closer to the death ray. Take a look at this. Naya shoved a piece of alien tech into his hands. It was sleek, shiny, and likely more advanced than anything Blightfall had ever seen. A real beauty, if beauty was synonymous with potential carnage. Jaxer turned it over, squinting at the alien script. Think this thing might have a self-destruct button we can use to our advantage, Naya chuckled. If it does, I'm betting it's labeled in Glorm, which I don't speak. Neither do I, but I'm fluent in tech jury-rigging, Jaxer said, his grin widening into something almost feral. Let's see if we can't teach this hunk of space junk to speak our language. Are you sure that's wise? Naya asked, her voice tinged with caution. Wise? No. But when have we ever let wisdom get in the way of a perfectly good plan? He shot her a wink and got to work. The thing about alien tech is it always looks like it was designed by someone who never had to fix it themselves. Jaxer pried open panels, poking at circuits with the delicacy of a uni student disarming a smoke detector at a party. "What do you think?" Naya asked, peering over his shoulder. "I think we might have a way to turn this alien gizmo against them," Jaxer mused. "Their tech is integrated into their systems. If we can hack it, we might just crash their whole network." "You mean like turning off a light switch?" "More like turning off a whole grid with a well-placed sledgehammer." The glimmer of hope wasn't something Blightfall was used to, and Jaxer felt a swell of pride at the idea. If they could pull this off, it'd be like David versus Goliath, except David was severely undercaffeinated and outgunned. He turned to Naya. "I'm gonna need a few more hands and a lot more luck. I'll round up the usual suspects," she said, giving him a nod. "Maggie's probably got them doing something productive like not dying." Jaxer laughed, a short, sharp bark. "I hate to interrupt, but we're gonna need all the not-dead people we've got." Naya headed off, leaving Jaxer alone with his newfound alien friend. He stared at it, contemplating the intricacies of alien design. "You and me, we're gonna be great pals," he muttered. Once Naya returned with the crew, including Cadden, Maggie, and even Clive, who looked like someone had just told him his drink tab was due, they set up shop in the maintenance bay. It was a cramped, chaotic mess, but it was their mess. "All right, listen up," Jaxer called, tapping the alien device for attention. "We've got a game changer here. This chunk of tech might just be the key to flipping the script on those alien bastards." Cadden raised an eyebrow. "What's the catch?" "The catch is we've got to crack this thing open and rewire it to send a feedback loop through their system. If it works, it'll knock their tech offline for a good while. And if it doesn't?" Maggie asked, her voice level but her eyes betraying her concern. Jaxer shrugged. "Then we'll have a lovely fireworks display to enjoy in our last moments." Clive snorted. "Typical. Always the optimist, eh, Jaxer?" Jaxer grinned, all teeth and mischief. "I figure if I can't be optimistic, I can at least be entertaining." They dove into the project with a fervor only desperation could fuel. Tools clanged, sparks flew, and curses bounced off the walls like errant rubber balls. Jaxer moved among his crew, offering guidance, cracking jokes, and trying not to let the monstrous weight of their situation crush his spirit. "Touch that wire and you'll light up like a Christmas tree," he warned Cadden, who was wrestling with a particularly stubborn component. "Good thing I like living life on the edge," Cadden replied, gritting his teeth as he focused. "Just make sure you don't edge yourself into the afterlife," Jaxer quipped. The Iors dragged on, each one feeling like a lifetime. Jaxer's hands were a blur of motion, his mind a whirlwind of calculations, each one more improbable than the last. But improbability was Blightfall's bread and butter. Finally, after what felt like an eternity trapped in a time loop of their own making, they stepped back to admire, or at least assess, their handiwork. "Moment of truth," Jaxer said, his voice tight with anticipation. "We flipped the switch and either we're geniuses or we're toast, or both," Naya added, ever the realist. With a deep breath, Jaxer reached for the makeshift control panel. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he activated the device. For a moment, nothing happened. A heartbeat later, the room was filled with a tension so thick it was practically solid. Then slowly, lights began to flicker throughout Blightfall. Come on," Jaxer muttered, eyes glued to the alien tech as if willing it to succeed. Outside, the alien bombardment faltered, their ships hesitating like deer caught in headlights. One by one, their lights dimmed, their weapons falling silent in a symphony of failure. A cheer erupted from the crew, loud and raucous. The sound echoed through the maintenance bay, a rare note of triumph in a city known for its dirges. "Looks like we've bought ourselves some time," Cadden shouted, clapping Jaxer on the back. "Time for what?" Clive asked, folding his arms. "Time to figure out just how we're gonna make this permanent," Jaxer replied, the weight of reality already settling back onto his shoulders. "We've poked the hornet's nest and they're gonna be pissed when they recover." Maggie nodded, her expression one of grim determination. "Then let's not waste the opportunity." The glimmer of hope flickered in their eyes, a spark in the darkness. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. In Blightfall, hope was a rare commodity and victory even more so. As they regrouped, Jaxer couldn't help but feel a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. They'd managed to pull off the impossible, at least for the moment. But they weren't out of the woods yet. "All right, folks, let's get back to work," Jaxer said, clapping his hands for emphasis. "We've got a lot more to do before this is over." And so they did, diving back into the fray with all the reckless abandon of the doomed. Because if there was one thing Blightfall was good at, it was defying the odds, one crazy stunt at a time. As they worked, Jaxer couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. They'd won a battle, sure, but the war was far from over. The Glorm weren't known for their forgiveness, and Blightfall was still very much in their crosshairs. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they'd pulled off a miracle, and that was a victory worth savoring, even if it was just for a moment. "Hey Jaxer," Cadden said, sidling up next to him. "You ever think about what you'd do if we actually win this thing?" Jaxer shrugged, the corners of his mouth curling upwards in a wry smile. "Maybe I'll open a nice little cafe. Serve espresso to aliens and humans alike. Call it Blight Brews," Cadden chuckled. "I'd come by, but only if you promise not to blow anything up." "No promises," Jaxer replied, laughing. For a brief moment, the weight of their situation lifted, if only just a little. They were standing on the precipice, but at least they were standing together. And in Blightfall, that was the best anyone could hope for. Jaxer leaned against the wall of the maintenance bay, his eyes narrowing at the alien contraption in front of him. It was a triumph of makeshift engineering, a chaotic medley of wires and circuit boards held together by sheer will and a lot of duct tape. If it could talk, it would probably beg for mercy. He glanced around at his ragtag band of misfits, each one looking as tired and grimy as he felt. Cadden was hunched over a console, his fingers deftly tapping at keys in a dance of desperation. Maggie paced nearby, her calm demeanor barely hiding the storm of tension beneath. Naya was pawing over the alien tech like a cat with a new toy, while Clive was muttering something that probably wasn't complimentary. "All right, gang," Jaxer started, his voice cutting through the clamor like a knife through a particularly stubborn piece of steak. "We've got one shot at this. We're gonna exploit the Glorm's love for predictability and boring schedules." Cadden looked up, his grin as manic as ever. "You mean our day-to-day existence is finally gonna pay off?" "Exactly," Jaxer said, his lips twisting into a smirk. "We've been living in a world of beige for so long, it's time to weaponize it." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "How do you weaponize monotony?" "By turning it into chaos," Jaxer replied. "We're gonna feed our mediocrity right back into their systems. When they try to adapt, they'll crash harder than a toddler after a sugar rush." Clive snorted, a sound not unlike a disgruntled cat. "So, our biggest asset is being boring. That's just tragic but effective," Jaxer said, rubbing his hands together with glee. "Nothing says gotcha like turning the tables with a yawn." He turned to the alien device, now connected to Blightfall's mainframe. It hummed with a foreboding energy, ready to unleash its potential chaos. Jaxer's fingers hovered over the controls, the weight of the moment not lost on him. If he messed this up, the Glorm would be on them faster than a cheap suit at a funeral. "Ready?" he asked, looking at his team. "As we'll ever be," Maggie said, crossing her arms. Her expression was pure determination, a blend of calm and "I'm about to kick some ass." "Then let's light this candle," Jaxer said, slamming his hand on the panel. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was silent except for the distant hum of machinery and the sound of Clive's disgruntled breathing. Then a series of lights blinked on the device, like a drunk Christmas tree trying to stay upright. Outside, the alien fleet did what no one expected. It stuttered. Their ships, so precise and regimented, began to falter, their orderly formation dissolving into a confused mess. It was like watching a military parade descend into a chaotic Kangal line. The ancient alarm system in Blightfall blared, its harsh screeching a familiar and oddly comforting sound. It was a symphony of impending doom, only this time it was the Glorm's doom being signaled. General V. Rixel, tucked away in his flagship, paced furiously. His usual smug demeanor had been replaced with a look of utter disbelief. His command deck was in disarray, officers scrambling like headless chickens. "What is happening?" Vrixel demanded, his voice a mix of rage and fear. The screen before him showed nothing but static, the once pristine data streams now a jumble of nonsensical numbers and letters. They've overloaded our systems, sir," an officer stammered. "The humans. Their chaos is. It's effective, of course, it's effective." Vrixel snapped, his fists clenching. "We underestimated their capacity for disorder." Vrixel's tactical mind was in overdrive. Psychological warfare was his forte, but he hadn't counted on the humans using sheer mundanity as a weapon. It was like being forced to watch paint dry, but the paint was actually on fire, and somehow that fire was spreading to his entire fleet. Back in Blightfall, the mood shifted from tense anticipation to jubilant disbelief. The humans had done it. They'd turned their lackluster existence into a strategic weapon, and it was glorious. "Did we really just bore them to death?" Cadden asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "Looks like it," Jaxer replied, a grin playing on his lips. "Our mundane little lives just became their worst nightmare." Clive's sour expression softened, if only for a moment. Who knew being uninteresting could be so interesting? "Let's not get cocky," Maggie warned, though her eyes were bright with triumph. "We've just bought ourselves some time. We need to figure out how to press this advantage." Jaxer nodded, already thinking ahead. They'd won a round, but the fight wasn't over. The Glorm would regroup and they'd come back with a vengeance. But for now, they had something they hadn't had in a long time: hope. As they regrouped, the comm system crackled to life, Captain Voss's voice coming through with its usual deadpan delivery. "Nice work, team. You've managed to confuse the hell out of them. Keep it up." Jaxer chuckled. "Always knew our charm would save the day. We've got a long road ahead," Voss continued. "But you've proven that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. Keep them off balance and we might just have a chance." As the message ended, Jaxer turned to his team. "All right, let's keep this momentum going. We've got to make sure they don't recover." Naya was already buried in a pile of schematics, her mind racing with possibilities. "If we can disrupt their communications network, it'll take them ages to coordinate a counterattack." "Sounds like a plan," Jaxer agreed. "Let's see how much damage we can do with the power of mundane." With renewed energy, they set to work. Sparks flew, curses rang out, and laughter bubbled up in unexpected moments. It was chaos, but it was their chaos, and it was working. In the midst of it all, Jaxer took a moment to appreciate just how far they'd come. Blightfall was still a mess, still a swirling maelstrom of noise and desperation, but it was their mess. And for once, they were calling the shots. "Hey, Jaxer," Cadden said, sidling up beside him once more. "You ever think we'd make it this far?" Jaxer shrugged, a smile tugging at his lips. "Nah, but then again, I didn't think we'd be using our lack of social life as a weapon either." Cadden laughed, the sound bright and infectious. "Guess there's hope for us all yet." As they continued their work, the weight of the universe seemed to lift, if only a little. They were still in the fight, still standing against the odds, and that was something worth celebrating. Back aboard the Glorm flagship, General Vrixel stood at the edge of his command deck, his mind a storm of frustration and begrudging respect. The humans had managed to do the unthinkable, and now it was his turn to adapt. "Order a full retreat," he barked, his voice carrying the weight of a decision made out of necessity rather than choice. "We need to regroup and find a way to counter this." Madness. As the command was relayed, Vrixel's eyes narrowed. This wasn't over. He would find a way to turn the tide, to crush the humans and their chaotic tactics. But for now, he had to concede defeat. In Blightfall, the mood was one of cautious optimism. They'd won a battle, not the war, but it was a start. And as the alien ships retreated, the city let out a collective sigh of relief. Jaxer stood with his team looking out over the chaotic beauty of Blightfall. It was their home, their fortress, and now their battleground. They'd managed to outwit the invaders with the most unlikely of weapons, their own lives. "All right, folks," Jaxer said, clapping his hands together. "Let's get back to it. We've got a lot more work to do." As they set back to work, the future felt just a little bit brighter. They were still in the fight, still standing together, and for the first time in a long time it felt like they might just have a chance. Blightfall had returned to its usual state of organized chaos, emphasis on chaos, with the alien threat momentarily repelled. The streets were alive with the familiar sounds of malfunctioning tech, simmering arguments, and the odd explosion that everyone pretended not to notice. For a city constantly teetering on the edge of collapse, it was reassuringly normal. Jaxer stood at the viewport of the maintenance bay, hands stuffed in his pockets. He surveyed the asteroid field that had become their unlikely savior. Who'd have thought space debris could be heroic? It was like being saved by a banana peel in a cartoon, but hey, whatever worked. "Looks like the Glorm are licking their wounds," Cadden remarked, sidling up beside him. His fingers were still stained with grease and he hadn't looked this relaxed since, well, ever. "Think they'll be back?" Jaxer shrugged. "Probably. Like a bad penny or an unwanted relative during the holidays, they'll turn up eventually." Cadden chuckled. "Well, at least we've proved that a little chaos can go a long way." Who knew mediocrity was a superpower? Not exactly the kind of thing you can put on a resume, huh? Jaxer mused, smirking. Master of blah. Behind them, Maggie and Naya were discussing something with fervent gesticulations, likely about how to weaponize boredom even further. With any luck, they'd figure out a way to make the Glorm allergic to it, like peanuts or common sense. Clive was hunched over another console, grumbling like a bear that had stubbed its toe. "I swear, if I have to listen to one more minute of that screeching alarm, I'm gonna personally dismantle it with my teeth." "Don't strain yourself, Clive," Jaxer called over. "We're saving your rage for the next crisis." Clive shot him a glare that could melt lead but said nothing. That was basically a declaration of friendship in Clive speak. Captain Voss's voice crackled over the comms, the monotone delivery like a lullaby of indifference. "Good work, team. Blightfall's buzzing about your little stunt. You've got the whole galaxy talking. Great, maybe we can start charging for interviews," Jaxer said, rolling his eyes. "Finally make some money off this dump." "Careful, Jaxer, you'll end up a celebrity," Voss replied. "They'll want to name an asteroid after you." "Ah, the pinnacle of achievement," Jaxer returned, grinning. "Having a rock in space named after me. A true legacy." The celebration was muted but heartfelt. A victory by accident was still a victory after all. The citizens of Blightfall, used to enduring rather than enjoying, were visibly lighter, as if the air itself had been cleansed of an invisible weight. Jaxer found himself at the center of a small gathering in the common area, where the smell of burnt coffee mingled with the scent of something vaguely edible. Spirits were high, and the jokes flowed like the cheap booze someone had managed to scrounge up. "I heard the Glorm are considering therapy," one of the mechanics quipped. "They'll be talking about the fear of boring humans for centuries." "Good," Jaxer replied, raising a toast with a battered metal cup. "Better they fear us than ignore us. And if that means boring them to death, so be it." Laughter erupted. It was the laughter of survivors, those who'd stared down the abyss and found it lacking. Jaxer looked around at his ragtag crew, each one grinning despite the grime and the exhaustion. They'd done the impossible and it felt damn good. "Jaxer," Maggie said, sidling up beside him with a smirk that could launch 1,000 broken ships. "You think we've really got a chance against them long term?" He considered this, the weight of it settling on his shoulders like an old, familiar jacket. "Maybe, maybe not. But we've got one hell of a weapon in our corner now." "Boredom? No," he said, looking at his team with a wry smile. "Us." The party continued into the night, and for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of camaraderie that went beyond survival. They weren't just making do, they were making history. As the festivities wound down, Jaxer found himself alone by the viewport once more, the stars winking at him like they were in on a cosmic joke. Blightfall was still a mess, and tomorrow would bring new problems. But for now, they'd earned this moment of peace. Naya joined him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "You ever think we'd see a day like this?" "Not in a million years," Jaxer admitted. "But I'm glad we did," she nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, I think there's something to be said for simplicity. We might not have much, but we've got each other." "Yeah," Jaxer said, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. "And sometimes that's all you need." The universe, vast and indifferent, would keep expanding and the Glorm would return. But Blightfall had found its footing, a tiny flicker of defiance in the darkness. And as long as they had each other, they'd keep fighting, keep living, one mundane day at a time. Jaxer turned back to the room where his team was sprawled in various states of exhaustion. "All right, folks, let's get some rest. Tomorrow we go back to being the most boring thing in the galaxy." Clive groaned from his seat. "Back to the grind, huh?" "Yeah," Jaxer said, grinning. "But this time it's personal." As they drifted off to their quarters, the city settled into a tentative quiet. The ancient alarm system, thankfully silent for now, stood as a reminder of the chaos they'd narrowly avoided. The asteroid belt outside gleamed, a symbol of resilience and unexpected heroism. In the days that followed, Blightfall became a beacon, albeit a dusty, slightly dysfunctional one, of hope. Messages filtered in from other settlements and outposts, each one offering congratulations and solidarity. The power of unity, even in the face of overwhelming odds, could not be overstated. The galaxy, for better or worse, now knew of Blightfall and its intrepid defenders. Jaxer's team had become something of a legend, the tale of their absurd victory spreading like wildfire. It was a tale of underdogs, of cleverness over brute force, and it resonated with anyone who'd ever felt overlooked or underestimated. The Glorm, meanwhile, retreated to their corner of the universe, licking their wounds and plotting their next move. Their defeat was a bitter pill to swallow, the taste of mundane human resilience lingering unpleasantly in their mouths. In Blightfall, life continued with its usual chaotic rhythm. The streets, once fraught with tension, now thrummed with a cautious optimism. People still argued, tech still failed, but there was a sense of belonging that hadn't been there before. They were a community, united by the shared experience of survival against the odds. Jaxer stood at the forefront, his team by his side, each one carrying the weight of their victory with pride. They'd faced the darkness and had come out the other side, stronger for it. As the stars wheeled overhead, Jaxer allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. They'd made a difference not just for themselves but for the galaxy at large. And while there were still battles to be fought, still challenges to overcome, they'd proven that they could stand against any storm. Together, they'd turned the mundane into the miraculous, and in the process, they'd found something worth fighting for. "Hey, Jaxer," Cadden called, breaking into his thoughts. "You ready to do this all again tomorrow?" Jaxer turned, a smile spreading across his face. "You bet. Let's keep boring the universe one day at a time." With that, they returned to their work, their laughter echoing through the halls of Blightfall. The universe might be an uncaring place, but they had each other. And in the grand scheme of things, that was pretty damn remarkable.